Documentary TV present. This program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, so we're all set to go here. Scheduled 15-round World Middleweight Championship. There's Jake LaMotta.
It was a fight that was to end one of the most famous rivalries in boxing. A fight so brutal and bloody that it would become known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
That brought blood from Robinson's nostril, the left with the right cross.
Jake LaMotta, the raging bull, tough, relentless, and seemingly impervious to pain.
Some of those short shots by Robinson would rock a truck, but they don't seem to move LaMotta.
Sugar Ray Robinson, renowned for his dancing style, sleek, fast, and deadly, for many the best boxer of all time.
Boy, these are all of Ray Robinson's Sunday punches.
Like so many fighters, these two boxers had come from hardship and poverty. Boxing had offered them the chance of a better life. But to get here, they'd had to face the dark forces that controlled the fight game. The mob. But while Sugar Ray Robinson would rely on his pure skill, Jake LaMotta had to enter a shadowy underworld to carve a path to success.
I just went right ahead and do what I thought was the best thing for me to do. And if I had to do it all over again, I would do the same thing.
Boxing is the ultimate test of individual courage, but this has always left it open to exploitation.
Boxing is two people in a ring. That's it. So one person taking a dive is a much easier thing to control than an entire baseball team.
In such a corrupt world, losing a fight can be more profitable than winning.
Whether it was a kickback at purse, whether it was a connection payoff, whether it was a fight fix, whatever it was, the mob was there.
This is the story of how throughout the history of boxing, the sport's biggest fight has been against the world of organized crime. Growing up in the slums of 1930s America was a tough business. For the young Jake LaMotta, surviving in New York's Bronx meant literally fighting on the streets.
I was probably the original juvenile delinquent. I was always in trouble with the law, always. I should have went to the reform school many years before I did.
But once in reform school, it was boxing that saved him.
Oh, I practically was born into it. It came so natural with me. I was always fighting on the streets, and when I went to reform school, my occupation in the reform school was taking care of the gym. And within the gym, there was a big bag and a small bag, and I made up my mind I wanted to become a fighter when I got older.
LaMotta became a professional boxer at the age of 19. His aggressive style echoed his childhood street fighting.
No one was tougher than Jake LaMotta. No one was stronger than Jake LaMotta. And he had a technique about him because he would barrage and he would aggressively charge you without getting hit. And he fought anybody.
LaMotta's greatest opponent would be Sugar Ray Robinson. Born in the same year as LaMotta, he grew up in the ghettos of Detroit.
Well, he grew up in a neighborhood called Black Bottom, and as he said, black because that's what we were, and bottom because that's where we were at.
Rather than being drawn into petty crime, Robinson would earn money by dancing on the streets. He also developed a passion for boxing.
Some kids play baseball, some play football. He grew up in a gym, boxing gym.
Documentary TV.
So that's what he liked to do, and he would do it. And he was very good at it, he found out. At that time, he was just a skinny little kid, but he developed, especially after he came to New York, into a wonderful amateur fighter.
For both Robinson and LaMotta, boxing offered an escape from the poverty trap. But it also meant dealing with members of the Mafia who turned to organized crime as their way out of the same tough neighborhoods.
There was a very direct dealing between mob guy and fighter. In those days, the mob guys held a special place they no longer hold. And so a certain amount of reverence built up around him. Now you take a fighter who really, particularly in those days, I mean, you're not going to see too many Harvard and Yale fellows entering that business. It's very hard to get hit all the time. These were kids, tough kids who needed the money, who saw it as a way out of the particular ghetto that they were involved in. And the mob was a natural for them, because they appreciated those guys wearing the $1,000 suits. Those guys came from their beginnings. They were a little overwhelmed by that.
At the center of this world was Frank Carbo, a feared member of the Mafia and a notorious killer. He ran the illegal gambling rackets associated with boxing.
And Frankie Carbo was just a thug. You know, he was just a tough guy who made boxing his realm, just like other mobsters made the docks their realm, or liquor and cigarette imports, or narcotics or prostitution their realm. Frankie Carbo was the mobster that basically ran boxing in the 40s and into the 50s.
Although Frank Carbo didn't officially manage any boxers, he had such an influence over their handlers that he was the one person who could decide who was going to fight in New York's premier arena.
There was one venue, and it was called Madison Square Garden. And Carbo did business there, but nobody got close to him. Mr. Gray in his gray fedora, his very, very nicely tailored suits, and you couldn't fight in Madison Square Garden if you didn't do some sort of business.
It was against this background of corruption that Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson were proving themselves as boxers. Robinson's dancing feat had earned him a reputation as an exciting and stylish fighter, while LaMotta's bullish determination and resilience were helping to make his name.
I was always bitter about being uncrowned champ for 5 years, and nobody wanted to fight me because I didn't have no Mafia behind me.
LaMotta's skill in the ring didn't go unnoticed. The mob knew they could make big money out of his fights and were keen to promote him on their terms. Through his brother, Joey, they tried to convince Jake that he should cooperate.
I tried to avoid them. All my life I avoided them. My brother was the one that was involved with it. And he only did it for me. Bring back messages to me. Because they knew I didn't want to bother with them.
Carbo wanted LaMotta to throw a fight against one of his boxers, Billy Fox, and in return he promised him a shot at the title. This tough decision for LaMotta became the central theme of one of the most famous boxing films ever, Raging Bull.
Now you do this for me, you understand? You tell him. I don't care how colorful he is, how great he is. He could beat all the Sugar Ray Robinsons and the Tony Janeros in the world, but he ain't gonna get a shot at that title, not without us, he ain't. Now, you're a smart kid. You go there. You talk.
When LaMotta's brother delivered the message from Carbo, Jake knew it was an opportunity he couldn't refuse. But it drew him into the heart of the world he tried to avoid for so long.
I wanted to give my... opportunity to fight for the championship of the world. I deserved it. I was uncrowned champ for 5 years. I deserved that shot. Nobody wanted to give it to me, so I just went right ahead and do what I thought was the best thing for me to do. And if I had to do it all over again, I would do the same thing.
The deal that LaMotta said he'd never make was secretly struck. LaMotta conceded the fight in the 4th round, but his performance was less than convincing.
LaMotta did not pretend at all to be serious about this fight, and made it clear to everyone that he was indeed throwing the fight, which of course opened up, the fight to all kinds of investigation.
LaMotta had his license to fight in New York suspended. Meanwhile, the man who had corrupted LaMotta was going from strength to strength. Carbo increased his control over boxing through developing a friendship with the new owner of Madison Square Garden, James Norris. Norris was a multi-millionaire keen to develop his interests in boxing. He bought up the venues and secured deals for television coverage.
He had a television contract in the facility to put it in for his Friday night fights, but he didn't have the fighters. And so he turned to Frankie Carbo, Mr. Gray, and they mobbed up almost every big fighter.
It was a very mutually beneficial relationship. Norris tries to maintain that he was just a businessman, but he wasn't. He had undercover pieces of fighters. He was a social blue blood. He came from all sorts of money. He was fabulously wealthy, but he was a thief. He was no good. He was a criminal.
In 1949, Norris set up the International Boxing Club, which would effectively run the sport throughout the 50s.
The IBC, the International Boxing Club, was called the Octopus because it controlled everything. You couldn't fight. Coupled with their hold on all the major arenas, their TV contracts, and Frank Carbo threatening to break anybody's legs, that was it. They controlled everything.
2 years after throwing the fight for Carbo, LaMotta was finally given the chance to fight for the World Middleweight Championship against Marcel Cerdan.
In round 9, LaMotta, always a great puncher, stays close, trying to minimize Cerdan's right. LaMotta in dark trunks with the white waistband sends his victory, but the gallant Frenchman won't give up, trying to get one punch home that will end it all. But LaMotta, who can give it as well as take it, steps up the pace. And although he respects Cerdan, he wants that title. The end comes dramatically in the 10th round when Cerdan cannot answer the bell. His left arm, injured in the fall of the first round, proves Cerdan's undoing, and Jake LaMotta is the new middleweight champion.
When I finally won the title from Marcel Cerdan, wow, celebration in the Bronx and the car parade and everything, it was a great, great feeling.
LaMotta had reached his ultimate goal, but eager to take his title away was his old rival, Sugar Ray Robinson. Robinson had been hugely successful on his tour in Europe, building a fearsome reputation on his own terms.
Robinson was outside of the mob, and he was so good they had to do business with him. He didn't have to do business with them, a la Joe Louis. They never did business with him because he was too big. You know, if a man's big and he made it on his own before the mob came in, he was usually sacrosanct. He was over here. He was protected. Robinson was that good.
He was already welterweight world champion, but now he wanted the middleweight belt. In 1951, Robinson got his chance to challenge LaMotta for the title. The scene was set in Chicago Stadium for a fight that would go down in history.
In the white trunks, Sugar Ray Robinson. In the black trunks, Jake LaMotta.
No giving punches. Be careful of your low punches. They may cost you a round.
LaMotta and Robinson had fought 5 times up to then. LaMotta at that point had been the only man in 143 fights to beat Robinson. LaMotta had never been knocked down. LaMotta was a rock.
Robinson could punch. He liked to be like a will-o'-the-wisp. He's here, he's there, he's moving to this side, he's moving to that side. He pulls back, he sticks his chin out, pulls it back, and then suddenly he throws a combination and it's bing, bang, boom, like that, so fast you barely see it. It's like machine gun fire.
As they say that, Ray Robinson lands a nice combination. I thought that LaMotta may have won the first round. Robinson definitely won 2 and 3, and I thought LaMotta might have won the 4th, so it's a fairly close fight here.
Every once in a while he would stop running, stay still, and stop throwing punches real fast.
And you see LaMotta trying to finish his fight off. What courage! He lands the right hand. He nails him with the left hook, another left hook, the right hand.
And it was a war. It was a war.
What a terrific fight this has turned out to be. LaMotta, no quit in him, has
The barrage of punches that LaMotta threw in the 11th round took its toll, but not so much on Robinson as on LaMotta himself, who began to tire.
Look at the shots taken to that face, and the way that left arm is hanging, it's just target practice. And the right hand crashes to the jaw of Jake LaMotta. LaMotta wants to hold the left hand high, but he can't. Look at him bang those ribs again. Oh, I can feel it myself. Oh, another one right at the top of the ribs, and then just drops the elbow more.
LaMotta's strength started to ebb. Whether it was his training regimen of having to get his weight down, whether it was the punches that Robinson was landing, because his leverage was unbelievable. From then on in, he just used LaMotta as a punching bag. He became a human punching bag.
Middleweight champ having all kinds of trouble. LaMotta, you can just feel wants so bad, but notice he's being backed out for the first time in the fight.
LaMotta's best punch was a left jaw to the right glove. He was just taking punch after punch after punch. And the 13th round was one of the most one-sided, using a Muhammad Ali phrase, ass-whoopings you have ever seen.
I'll tell you, Jake is not short on courage, but he's lacking in the boxing ability. He does not lack in desire. They call him the nickname, the Raging Bull. You can see why. I said it before, we take a knife to the heart to drop this man. Look at the right hand landing. Jake cannot keep his left hand up, and he really doesn't want to lift his left elbow because of all things.
The fight had been so hard-fought, brutal and bloody, it became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
And yet LaMotta didn't go down, which was his pride then and is still his pride.
There's a beaten man, a hurt man. His ribs have got to be broken. A great championship victory for Sugar Ray Robinson. Great courage for Jake LaMotta.
I wouldn't go down. They finally stopped the fight with me on my feet with Robinson pounding me up against the ropes. If the referee held up another 30 seconds, Robinson would have collapsed from hitting me. And I believe that.
He took pride in that. He took pride in that. That's what kind of a guy he is. He took pride in his ability. He took pride in his record. He took pride in Jake LaMotta.
I'd like to ask you one question before you go, Ray. When did you know that you had him? Because you were fighting pretty evenly for 8 rounds.
Well, that's the way we planned the fight. We figured LaMotta would be strong as he was. First part of the fight and the last part of the fight, he would weaken. We figured to box along the first part of the fight and wait till he showed signs of weakening, which he did.
I see.
And in those late rounds,
Documentary TV.
He showed signs, and my manager told me to start throwing, open up heavier punches.
Yeah, I was champion at that time, and he took my title away. But I couldn't have lost it to a greater champ. He was great, great champion.
Sugar Ray Robinson was now middleweight champion of the world, an exceptional boxer who would prove himself to be one of the greatest fighters of all time. Robinson reveled in the glamour of being a champion and in the lifestyle that went with it.
Ray Robinson really was the first fighter to have what became known as the entourage. He had his manager, he had several other trainers and hangers-on. He had his golf pro, he had his hairdresser, he would have his wife, and there would be a dozen, 15 people on as part of his party. And we think now of Muhammad Ali's entourage, but all that started with Sugar Ray.
He enjoyed the role of showman so much that he retired from boxing in 1952 to try and make a career as a dancer. In the ring, he had been the main attraction, but his on-stage antics proved more of a sideshow. 3 years after retiring, and with the tax authorities pursuing him, Robinson had no choice but to return to boxing. It took Robinson less than a year to regain his middleweight crown, but it couldn't bring him either the money or the control over his career he'd once had. With all his prize money going to repay tax, His desperate financial situation finally brought him within the reach of the tentacles of the International Boxing Club. He was forced to sign an exclusive deal giving Jim Norris control of all his fights.
I'm proud of you, Ray, and what you did tonight certainly is, I think, giving boxing a great lift.
Oh, yeah?
I'm proud of you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I'm proud to have you proud of me.
Tell us now what your plans are.
I don't know. I'm asking Jim Norris. What are my plans?
Jim Norris's plans for Robinson were simple. Defend your title, and if you lose it, as in this case against Gene Fulmer, then prepare for a rapid rematch. But by the late 50s, Norris's control was under threat as the authorities tried to break up the IBC's monopoly. Part of this process involved an attempt to catch the notorious Mr. Gray, Frank Carbo. Up to now, they hadn't been able to gather enough evidence to convict him.
He was only arrested 17 times, but 5 of them were for murder. But he killed far more people than that. He got away with them because organized crime had such control over the judges and the prosecutors. He would be charged, and suddenly these cases would just disappear.
Finally, they found a witness, boxing promoter Jackie Leonard, who was prepared to help them prove that Carbo was trying to extort money from him. Secret recordings they made finally provided enough evidence to arrest Mr. Gray. Carbo was sentenced to 2 years, but shortly after his imprisonment, he was brought out to testify before a Senate commission set up to investigate organized crime in America. They became known as the Kefauver hearings.
The Kefauver hearings were instrumental in making inroads in the mob, but it's a process that took decades to succeed. What it was the first real tough inroads by Congress and by the government to expose what the mob was, expose what stranglehold it had on boxing.
Most of those called to give evidence, including Norris and Carbo, claimed the Fifth Amendment.
Have you ever threatened any manager or boxer or promoter at any time within the last 10 years for not carrying out any wishes in the boxing industry? Your wishes.
I respectfully decline to answer the question on the ground that I cannot be compelled to be a witness against myself.
You're directed to answer.
I respectfully decline to answer the question on the ground that I cannot be compelled to be a witness against myself.
Jake LaMotta was then called to give evidence about losing his fight against Billy Fox.
The testimony you will give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes.
Although the public had a notion of the corrupt nature of boxing, what the former middleweight champion was about to admit would be one of the most shocking revelations in the history of boxing.
Mr. LaMotta, I believe you have stated before the subcommittee that you got the okay to go into the tank, as they say in boxing, to Fox on the last day before the fight. Is that correct?
Yes. I said I would lose to Billy Fox if I was guaranteed a championship fight.
I lost a fight which I never wanted to do in my life. I never wanted to do it. But that game made me get close to becoming a chance to fight for the title. That gave me an opportunity. And like I said before, if I have to do it again, I will probably do the same thing.
I think it was disastrous. Because don't forget, I looked up to Jake LaMotta. And so did the kids from the neighborhood look up to Jake LaMotta.
This is a pretty rough crowd, isn't it, Mr. LaMotta?
What is?
These people engaged in this boxing business.
I'm not afraid of none of them rats.
You're not afraid of any of them?
No, sir.
Everybody was scared of the Mafia, except me, because I was stupid. I wasn't so smart. I'm still not so smart. But I feared nobody. I hypnotized myself not to fear anybody and never to get hurt. So I defied the world. How I'm alive today, I'll never know.
And I told him that I wasn't interested in the money and that I was only interested
in a championship fight?
Jake LaMotta admitted it, I believe, because Jake won as a proud man. And he was proud not of the fact he threw the fight, but of the fact that he was able to get a championship shot at Marcel Cerdan, and win that. So that it was a contextual picture for him. Not, I threw a fight, end of paragraph. I had to throw a fight to get a shot at a title, and I won the title.
Enough evidence had mounted up against Frank Carbo to finally sentence him to 25 years. He would spend most of the rest of his life in jail. But if the authorities thought that prison would end Carbo's influence over boxing, they were wrong. Despite being behind bars, he continued to profit from the fight game. His main new money earner was the most renowned heavyweight to be linked with the Mafia, ex-convict Sonny Liston.
Sonny Liston was enormous, and Sonny Liston was a good athlete, and Sonny Liston learned how to fight in jail. And when he finished beating everybody up in jail, he was finally allowed to start beating people up in prize rings outside of jail.
Liston was a tremendous fighter. Liston was around today, he'd have a party. I mean, destroy everything. This guy was a destroyer.
The American media demonized Liston, especially when he challenged the popular and charismatic reigning heavyweight champion, Floyd Patterson.
Floyd Patterson was a kind of civil rights Negro. He was endorsed by politicians, including Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy very much wanted to see Floyd Patterson win, whereas Sonny Liston was seen as America's nightmare, a threatening criminal who made no apologies for that.
In 1962, with Liston having changed managers, Patterson eventually agreed to the fight.
Well, there are many obstacles, but I think they have all been removed satisfactorily. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today.
Although Patterson appeared to have overcome his concerns about Liston's criminal connections, the public remained unconvinced.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Sonny Liston.
To them, Liston was still the bad guy.
Weighing 189 pounds, wearing the black and white trunks from Yonkers, New York, the world heavyweight boxing champion, Floyd Patterson.
Documentary TV.
Despite the overwhelming public support for Patterson, it quickly became clear that he was no match for Liston.
Patterson seems to be hurt on the ropes. He is! Left to the body and a left hook. It's all over. It's all over in the first round. It's a knockout for Charles Sonny Liston in the first round. That must be one of the quickest wins in history.
When he won the title against Floyd Patterson, he did it in 2 minutes and 6 seconds. He wiped him out. And Floyd Patterson was a pretty deft, pretty interesting athlete. He wasn't a nobody, and Sonny Liston ran a truck over him.
So in just 2 minutes, Liston became the world heavyweight champion. But if he thought this would change the public's perception of him, he was wrong.
He was clearly never going to win the congratulations of white America, or black America for that matter. He was always going to be who he was, which was a guy with nothing, an ex-con, who would never win the affection, much less the respect of his audience.
The public is not with me now, but they'll have to swing along until somebody else come along to beat me.
Liston and his mob handlers didn't have to wait long for that someone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cassius Marcellus Clay. He's young, he's handsome. They know it. He's a poet, a prophet, and many people believe he'll be the next heavyweight champion of the world. Cassius, can I ask you how you're feeling now at this point of your training?
I'm feeling great. I'm ready to go to war right now.
Well, when you say you're ready to go to war right now...
I see that barrel in the street, I'll beat him before the fight.
You'd actually take him on before the fight?
Beat him like I'm his daddy.
I saw Sonny Liston a few days ago, Cassius.
Ain't he ugly? He's too ugly to be the world's champ. The world's champ should be pretty like me.
Cassius Clay, now comes for him the moment of truth. For months he's taunted Liston. He said what he's going to do to him. He's predicted 8 rounds. Now he has to make his fist do what his mouth has predicted. The heavyweight championship of the world from the right-hand corner. It's Cassius Clay against Sonny Liston.
From the first bell, the crowd expected Liston to march over and knock Clay out. But things didn't go as anticipated. Liston's initial problem was that he couldn't seem to catch Clay.
Clay going round this ring as fast as he said he would. He said he was going to be a dancer, and that's the way he is going to work it.
Not since Sugar Ray Robinson had anyone seen a boxer move like this.
Heavyweights didn't fight like this. Joe Louis didn't fight like that. No one did. Cassius Clay adapted Sugar Ray Robinson's style for a man nearly twice the size. You know, this kind of power with velocity added to it.
He wanted Sugar Ray Robinson to be his manager. That was Cassius Clay's idol. And he, as you can see just from the way he fought as much as a heavyweight can fight like Sugar Ray.
I just remember this, the moving feet and the white tassels on his boxing shoes, and Liston huffing and puffing a little bit, but still, I said he's going to wear him down. And then I remember suddenly, it was like somebody tapped me on the shoulder. It was so sharp. He's cut.
And Liston is cut underneath his left eye. Liston is cut under the left eye in round 3. Those jabs of Clay have opened up a cut on Liston's face. And now he's punishing the champion heavily. And Liston is in desperate trouble.
Clay was winning, clearly winning. And it was getting worse for Sonny Liston. He wasn't used to going very far into fights. It was clear that Clay was in brilliant physical condition, very fast, hitting them with jabs. He was basically hitting him at will and grinding Sonny Liston down. It hurts to get hit by a 200-pound man over and over again.
Four rounds and Clay goes to his corner looking a little bit tired.
But then at the end of the 4th round, it was Clay who seemed to have a problem.
And now Clay is screwing up his eyes in pain. Something on the gloves they're complaining has got into his eyes.
Both eyes were burning. I put my finger in his eye and I put it in my eye, it burnt. So what I did, I got the sponge, I washed out the eyes, wiped it with a towel, threw them both away, and cleaned up, and he was shaking his head. Take the gloves off, I want to prove the work, the dirty work afoot. And I see the referee coming towards the car. I says, get up. I got him up, and he's shaking his head. The only instruction I gave this kid was, run.
Clay isn't putting up much defense because he's saying all the time, I can't see, I can't see.
Despite being temporarily blinded, Clay continued to fight, holding Liston at bay and even taunting him.
And now he's fooling around with Liston. He's pushing and pawing up with the left hand against the champion's face. And Clay's corner are complaining that something has got on those gloves, and he's rubbed it into his eyes.
Because of Liston's mob ties, many at ringside believed that his corner had tried to cheat by rubbing some kind of chemical irritant onto his gloves in a deliberate attempt to blind Clay.
Two fighters who fought Liston before Clay, Zora Foley and Eddie Machen, had trouble with their eyes. Nice coincidence.
As soon as Clay's eyes had cleared, he came back at Liston with a vengeance.
He's making the champion look like a sparring partner. Liston now looking completely at sea. He doesn't know what it's all about. Like the rest of us, he's amazed.
Liston, who was several years older than Clay and not used to going more than 2 or 3 rounds, began to tire.
6 rounds completed. And the convention hall is rising not to the champion here, but to the challenger Cassius Clay.
Then, at the start of the 7th round, the fight took its most controversial turn.
And what's happened? Clay has won! Clay has won! Something has happened in Liston's corner, they're not going on. And Cassius Clay has won after 6 rounds, and there's the champion, the ex-champion.
No heavyweight champion had quit on his stool since Jess Willard in 1919. If people were prepared to believe that the blinding incident was an accident, they found the nature of Liston's defeat highly suspicious. Liston claimed he had a shoulder injury, but because of his Mafia links, there were rumors of a fix.
I believe the fight was fixed, but I don't have proof, but it seemed to me to be a very strange affair. The only reason I can find for the way Sonny Liston lost and the fact that he lost in the way that he did would have been that organized crime was betting against him.
But the rumored mob involvement was pushed to the back pages when shortly after the fight, the new heavyweight champion made an unprecedented announcement.
Why do you insist on being called Muhammad Ali now?
Now, that's the name given to me by my leading teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's my original name. That's a black man name. Cassius Clay was my slave name. I'm no longer a slave.
What does it mean?
Muhammad means worthy of all praises, and Ali means most high.
The new champion had converted to the Nation of Islam, a radical black religious group that preached separatist politics.
I say the earth belongs to the black man.
All of a sudden you got a guy who's a Muslim. People didn't know what a Muslim was. I thought it was a piece of cloth. I didn't know nothing about a religion. Who knew?
It was all very bizarre for people to absorb. And so the principal symbol of American athletic singularity and physical prowess, the heavyweight champion of the world, converting to this sect was extremely bizarre, even threatening to many, many people.
For many Americans, this new religion was seen as even more threatening than the mob. Promoters struggled to find a venue for the potentially lucrative rematch.
Well, the defense attorney just announced to the court the fight would not be held in Boston.
In May 1965, a venue was finally found in the town of Lewiston in Maine. But fears about the Nation of Islam and rumors of Mafia reprisals had created a very tense atmosphere.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Although Liston had quit in their first fight, his hardman reputation and formidable record meant that many believed he would get his revenge.
Well, did you ever see two fighters look at each other like that before the start of a fight? And this is the big one. This is for the world title. Clay defending, and Liston, the would-be avenger. Liston bids to become the second man in history to regain the heavyweight title. Clay trying to be flashy with those feet of his, treating Liston with his usual contempt. Gloves down, look at those hands, right down. This is foolish, his hands right down to his thighs, and just using his feet to keep out of trouble.
Then, within the first 2 minutes of this highly charged fight, there would be an incident that would go down as one of the most controversial in boxing history.
Liston, you'll notice, saving his punches until he gets within range. In the first fight, he was trying to throw him from all distances and all angles, and he wore him. And he's over. I don't know what happened there.
When Ali threw the punch, he was right above me. And I could see but his back was to me, and I could see his shoulder move, but I technically never saw the punch land.
Referred to as the phantom punch, it happened so quickly that the crowd immediately thought that Liston was faking.
The guys that complained about that were biting on a hot dog, or they had to go to the ladies' room or the men's room. See, it just happened like that. What happened, hon, was a simple move. Liston moved, missed the jab. My guy slid to the right, hit him on the right-hand shot in the temple, and the guy never recovered.
Everyone has their theory about the so-called phantom punch, but now, using special techniques, we can view the footage from a new angle and see clearly for the first time exactly what kind of blow floored Liston. This three-dimensional image shows a definite connection across Liston's jaw, but the question remains, was the punch enough to keep Liston down, or did he throw the fight?
Can you remember the punch he caught you with?
It was the right hand.
I suppose it must have hurt you.
Well, I wouldn't say it hurt me.
Don't you think you could have beaten the count then?
Yes, if he'd got away from over.
Under the rules of boxing, the referee should have halted the count until Ali was in a neutral corner. But Jersey Joe Walcott, a better boxer than he was a referee, lost control of Ali and of the count. Seemingly confused by the whole situation, he left the boxers to listen to the judgment of one of the reporters at ringside, who told him Liston had had more than 10 seconds on the canvas.
Did you see the fight? Well, how can a man get up when he's standing over you? If you get up, you're going to
Documentary
have to use your
TV.
hand, right? So how am I going to protect myself and get up too?
Despite Liston's complaints about the incompetence of the referee, many people were convinced it was a fix, a gambling coup set up by the mob.
And he's over. I don't know what's happened there. He hardly seems to touch him, and Liston can't get up.
They tried to say it was a fix. Then they're saying that the judge was a fix. They're saying that the referee was phony. They're saying that my managers are phony, Angelo Dundee. They're saying that Liston's people are phony. They're saying that the state commissioner's phony. And couldn't nobody pull no fix before the world like that.
Whether a fix or not, it marked another step in the decline of the Mafia's influence over boxing. It also marked the beginning of the end for Sonny Liston.
If America could ever forgive him before for being as mobbed up and as recalcitrant and as sullen as he was, they didn't forgive him now because he was that terrible thing that you're not allowed to be in, whether it's in American life or British life, and that's a loser. He had now lost twice in a row, and he'd lost under suspicious circumstances.
Although Liston returned to the ring for a further 16 bouts, he would never fight for the title again. In spite of earning millions in winnings, Liston did not retire a rich man. Huge percentages of the money he'd earned in the ring went to the mobsters who controlled his career. And as well as being a financial victim of the mob, some believe Liston literally became a victim of a Mafia hit.
To this day, there are people that think that, in fact, either he owed money or he had crossed somebody or other in Las Vegas, where he was living at the time, typically, and that he might have been murdered. Again, it's shadowy.
Might he have been involved in something involving drugs, and that's why he was done away with? That's very possible. Sonny Liston was a guy with many compartments in his life, and the one constant was the dark side never went away.
Meanwhile, Muhammad Ali would go on to become a boxing legend. Like his idol, Sugar Ray Robinson, Ali had taken his own way to the World Championship. In the same year as the so-called Phantom Punch, Robinson finally announced his retirement at the age of 45. Since first winning the middleweight title from Jake LaMotta, Robinson had gone on to become champion a total of 5 times. Altogether, he had fought 200 professional fights, winning 175 of them. Pound for pound, he's considered to be the greatest fighter of all time.
The Madison Square Garden had a night for him, and they brought in the fighters he had won the middleweight title from and presented him with this huge trophy. I think the trophy said the world's greatest fighter. And, you know, he got a tremendous applause, and everybody hugged him and made a big fuss over him.
But one person who wasn't allowed into the ring to acknowledge Robinson's greatness that night was his old rival, Jake LaMotta. Despite the fact that they'd fought 6 thrilling bouts, the boxing world still hadn't forgiven LaMotta for throwing the fight against Fox almost 20 years earlier.
They didn't invite me because I admitted throwing the fight. I was upset. Sure was upset. Because I was the main guy. He fought me 6 times. And they were all close fights. You don't fight 6 times unless they're close. They were wars.
LaMotta and Robinson had fought their epic bouts at a time when the Mafia ran the fight game. But after the Kefauver hearings and the demise of Sonny Liston, the mob had lost its grip on the boxing world. The most notorious era in the sport's history was over. But for many, boxing will always remain a dirty business.
Documentary TV Plus. If you want a more documentary video, just subscribe on our channel.